So, we can't trust the space lizards, right? I mean, you're telling me that there are 3 all-powerful beings who control and dictate the flow of time, and we're just supposed to accept they know what's best for us? As Ms. Minutes explained in her helpful instructional video, long ago there was a multiversal war that almost destroyed everything. Quick side note, if the next Avengers movie is not called Avengers Multiversal War, then I'm gonna be upset. Anyways, the multiversal war was devastating, but then 3 timekeepers emerged, bringing peace by reorganizing the multiverse into a single timeline, now called the Sacred Timeline, and they protect it by using the TVA to wipe out any variants or anomalies. But isn't that kind of tricky ethical ground? Loki gets understandably angry when he's told his whole life has been controlled and managed by the timeline. And even though right now it seems like the Timekeepers want to keep everything going in a peaceful way, I've learned from pop culture that no one ever likes to be told their destiny and timeline is preordained and they have no free will. Humans especially like free will. If I want to make the choice to go out at 3 a.m. and order 17 tacos while crying in my car, then dang it, I want to do that because it's my right to. Not because some lizard-face immortal being dictated that I would do that. So if Loki continues like this, then I think we're going to see some problems start to unfold. We're on the verge of the multiverse being blown wide open with things like these new Loki variants causing mischief and mayhem across the timeline, as well as things like Scarlet Witch, who could be a Nexus being, which was referenced both in WandaVision and in the first episode of Loki, looking for her 2 children, presumably across the multiverse. Add in Spider-Man dealing with returning Spider-Man villains from other universes, and Doctor Strange, who will be dealing with both Scarlet Witch as well as other multiversal issues in his upcoming sequel, The Multiverse of Madness. With all these deviations and issues that are coming, the Timekeepers might try to make a drastic, game-changing decision. To protect the timeline and to stop another multiversal war, they'll decide to either reset everything or send someone else to do it for them. I think this makes a lot of sense. It would frame the Timekeepers as not quite bad guys, but rather beings who care more about the greater good rather than the individual, which sets them up perfectly opposite Earth's mightiest heroes, as they believe all life should be saved and would fight for their own existence. But who would they send to fix the timeline and wipe out everything to start fresh? That's where Kang the Conqueror comes in. So, as we are all aware, comics can be a bit convoluted. Let's just say in the simplest of terms that there are a bunch of versions of Nathaniel Richards running around. I'm sure we've all heard about Kang the Conqueror by now, since he'll be part of Ant-Man Quantumania. But in the comics there's also Immortus and Iron Lad. All 3 of these personas, Kang, Immortus, and Iron Lad, are versions of Nathaniel Richards both from the past and the future, and it's a whole thing and my head is already spinning trying to comprehend it. Quick, someone give me one of those drinks that Mobius was drinking, or maybe some blue bubblegum. Now, as goofy and science fiction-y as the MCU has been recently, I don't see them truly adapting Nathaniel Richards' backstory 100% accurately. If we've noticed over the years, the MCU has streamlined a lot of different MCU stories to fit their narrative and make them easier to digest for a wider audience. I see the same thing happening here. Instead of introducing Kang the Conqueror, then Immortus, then Iron Lad, they'll just introduce Kang the Conqueror and have that be it. I think that's easier than following the comics where the Timekeepers choose Immortus to watch over the timeline, but then Kang kills the Timekeepers and splits from Immortus and creates a new future for himself when he doesn't become Immortus. That's all very timey-wimey, don't you think? So here's how the MCU adaptation could work. In the comics, the Timekeepers once recruited evil versions of the Avengers across the timeline to fight against the Avengers, which sounds pretty cool, but the MCU is already building the Dark Avengers as well as possibly the Thunderbolts, so that's not really super necessary, don't you agree? Instead of doing that in the MCU, they'll just use Kang the Conqueror instead and make him the Dark Avenger. He'll be used to correct the timeline and try to stop multiversal war, but by doing so has to eliminate a lot of people. It makes him similar to Thanos in that he's a villain who wants to cause mass, universe-wide destruction, but his reasonings behind it is to protect the entire multiverse from collapsing, which is the sort of big question quandary the MCU will have to deal with sooner rather than later. How likely is this to happen? Well, it makes a lot of sense to tie in Kang the Conqueror with the TVA, you know, because of time travel and all that. Plus, there's already a sort of connection. We have a new character in the Loki show named Judge Renslayer, and there's a character in the comics named Ravonna Renslayer, who's a love interest to Kang. Not saying the MCU will go there, but like, why include a character who has direct ties to Kang in Loki without eventually making that connection of having the 2 characters interact? Now, this next part is unlikely to happen, but I think it would be a great character moment. Say the TVA recruits Kang the Conqueror and he makes a surprise appearance at the end of the Loki show. He might be recruited alongside some other time-traveling beings, and they'll, in essence, form a pseudo-evil Avengers team. And the only person standing in their way from destroying the timeline? Loki. Think about how fitting that would be. Loki was the one who ultimately brought the Avengers together with his less than stellar plan of trying to divide them. It's a fact that's even hit hard upon in the first episode of Loki, that he was the one who brought the Avengers together. What better way to end the Loki series than to have Loki go up against an evil Avengers-like team to protect free will at the end of his show? It would be just such a complete character arc to see him beat an Avengers team for once, but this time for good. Of course, is that likely to happen? Probably not. Maybe if Loki was 13 episodes and not 6, but there is still a way for Loki to be involved in this new Kang the Conqueror-esque future. I assume the variant that Loki is going up against also wants free will for everyone and wants to destroy the TVA to do it. I think our Loki wants this too and will find a way to fight for free will without hurting a bunch of people. This fight will be the thing that forces the Timekeepers to bring in Kang the Conqueror in order to keep things in place. Here's a wacky idea that relates to the third Ant-Man movie. What if Kang makes an appearance in the Loki TV show and Loki ultimately beats him by trapping him in the past without his certain time travel capabilities? Kind of like in the way Loki was reset and glitchy for most of the first episode, maybe that could happen to Kang and then he's placed in the past. Once in the past, he starts polluting the timeline in such a way that Ant-Man Quantumania consists of the Ant-Man team going back in time in order to stop him, which inadvertently gives Kang the time travel technology needed to begin his reign as the MCU's next big bad. Is it perfect? No, but it would be entertaining. Overall, Kang is a great weapon for the Timekeepers to use, and it gives us another great villain in the MCU. Of course, maybe the Timekeepers have been replaced by the Time Twisters, like in the comics, and they only care about destroying everything, which allows them to send their hammer, Kang the Conqueror, back in time to do their bidding. That's a possibility too, so don't rule that out. But I think it's clear, no matter what routes they decide to take with Kang, there's no situation where the Timekeepers are ultimate good guys, right?